As an aside, using the thesaurus, a lot of editors say throw away your thesaurus. The reason for this being that using a big or unusual word from a thesaurus should not be done for its own purpose. It should be done because the word fits better. And if you don't know the word well enough to know that it fits better, then you shouldn't be looking up one. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, I would say I often use a thesaurus to look for that word that I know is there, that I just can't figure out at the moment. But don't feel like you have to expand into lots of flowery words. And poets can teach you this very well. Good poetry is not about using flowery words, it's about using the right word. Yes?
Isn't it good to not repeat the same word?
It is. It is.
So
there is that one. Yeah. This is getting into some deep level prose stuff, but Mark is right. You should be watching for unusual words. You know, something like you know, acidic, and then several paragraphs later, acidic. That just draws attention to itself. And so you want to get away from, make sure you're not doing that in your revisions. And that might be a reason also to look to the thesaurus and things like that. Yeah.
I had a question on, well, for example, knife and dagger. Let's say you're having a knife fight or something.
Yeah.
And
I would say go ahead and use knife and knife as often as you want. What you want to stay away from is using slash over and over. That's the knife is there. They're ready for the knife. But in your descriptions, if they're always just slashing each other, that's where you say, okay, instead of slashing, he's going to jab, and instead of, you want to just construct your sequence there so that particularly the verbs imply them doing different things. Using the right verb, by the way, is what a lot of masters of fiction say is the secret to good prose. Getting away from adverbs and adjectives and using the right verbs and nouns. The reason for this being that the verbs and nouns are the things doing the work. And the adverbs and the adjectives are actually not doing the work, they're just changing. It's like, to a lot of people, if you are using an adverb or an adjective, it means you haven't found the right noun or verb. This is why, has anyone heard it before? Cut down adverbs and adjectives? It's big writing advice. The main reason for it, I found, is, has anyone not heard that before? Okay, a couple of you. It becomes, a lot of high-level writing advice says, get rid of all adjectives and adverbs. And you'll find a lot of literary writers in particular will talk about this. I think that's going a little far, but the core meaning of what they're talking about is try and find the right word. Instead of saying he walked quietly, say he snuck, and that sort of thing. Instead of, this is the opposite of the said bookisms. With the said bookisms, you're distracting from your dialogue. These things you put in your descriptions and in your action moments when you want people focusing on that, and you're going to use the precise word and the precise language because their attention is on it then, and that's the good place for it. Granted, if you use something really weird, it's going to pull them out. So be aware of that. He had a question, then I'll come to you.
So, like, what if you find the perfect word, but like only 20% of your readership knows its definition? Let's say
that's fine. Just don't do that too often. Anne McCaffrey did this all the time, and I would, as a kid, have a dictionary next to me, but she used them in such good context that I knew what the word basically meant before I had to look up the word, and that's great writing.
I've had a teacher basically tell me to do the same thing. You go through, highlight all your adverbs and adjectives, but also deal with to-be verbs. To-be verbs, yes. I should have mentioned those. To-be verbs are usually a sign of something you can cut. Not always. Here's the thing. You have to realize where a to-be verb is in the wrong place. For instance, see if I can construct something. He was a tall man. He was working on his chopping wood when I found him. Well, you can just say, the tall man slammed his axe down on the wood, shattering it. And taking out the to was instead makes an active sentence out of two sentences that are bland description. And so cutting out the to-be verbs
it's a sign to watch for that can help you become a much better writer, is when you can look at those and see them highlighted and say, is there a way I can make this an active sentence with something happening, with descriptive, with the right verbs and the right nouns, instead of just viewing it and describing what it is.
What if it's like ideas you're trying to communicate?
You're not going to be able to get away from using some of them, particularly to be verbs. You just are not going to be able to get away from it. But all of these things are rules of thumb to, if you want to practice being more active and being more precise, highlighting these and saying, can I cut some of these and exchange them for more active verbs, you will find that it immediately takes your writing and changes it to something more engaging. Again, people use a lot of hyperbole here. Cut all of this, cut all of that. No, you don't need to cut all of this, you don't need to cut all of that. In fact, you'll find very good writers, great writers, who are using a lot of these. The tricks of these sorts of things is learning how to streamline your prose and make it more active, more concrete by using precise language. And it's something we can all work on more. You'll find mistakes, this is the sort of, show don't tell sort of stuff, which once again, you can find people doing it poorly in even the greatest works you'll read, because it is so hard to do all of the time. But practicing and learning, and particularly those early pages of yours you want to send to that editor, you really want to show off, this sort of stuff can really make you show off. If you can make it so that there are very few to-be verbs in those early pages, and show that you can really make it work. Of course, what you really want to do is do it for your whole book. But certainly, for those first chapters, take a look at these things and see where you can cut them. One of the things that we're doing here is we're getting rid of the passive voice. The hammer was slammed against the table is passive voice, because what this means is, you probably all know it, just I'll describe it for those who don't. What it means is, something is happening to the hammer. The hammer was slammed against the table. In a sentence where the hammer is actually doing the action. And so changing it to the hammer slammed against the table, instead of saying it was slammed against the table, it doesn't change the tense. It still happens in the past tense, but what it does is it makes the hammer, which is actually doing something, the focus of the sentence. That's actually different from Billy slammed the hammer against the table. Billy slammed the hammer against the table, then is making Billy do the action. And asking yourself with your sentences, who is supposed to be doing the action, what is supposed to be doing the action, and how can I make sure that it has a correlation to what's happening, is another way to beef up your prose. The passive voice really is something to kill all of the time, if you can. This is one that is even more absolute than the others. You really can get around to getting rid of that passive voice. And you'll start doing it by second nature as you write better and better. All right? Yes?
When going from writing adult fiction to young adult fiction,
Yes.
do you consciously change your language, or is it just the content?
I don't change the complexity of my sentences.
Mm-hmm.
I change the complexity of the story to streamline it. That is basically what I look to do. When it goes through my editors will often say, this is not a middle grade word, let's look for another word. And I let them be the judge on that and help me. I'm revising a young YA book right now, and one of the big pieces of advice I got back from the editor is, and this was good advice, was that, my books are magic system books often. This book is a magic system book. But even though I had taken care for the learning curve, they felt I still overloaded on the magic too early, and they wanted to shift toward character early. Because you need in that YA book to latch on the character, and they said, it's good that all that complexity is there. What we want you to do is make it more boneheady in the magic system department in the first 3 chapters, and ease into it, so that it's still just as complex by chapter 10. But the first 3 chapters you're using even vaguer terms, and things like that for the magic to keep the focus on the character. Which is great advice. Really for any book, but specifically for the children's books. In my adult books, I can trust my readers who know my books to jump into chapter 1 and say, okay, we're going to get crazy magic system here. I'll just deal with it because this is what Brandon's books are about. The kids, that's a bad move. You had a question?
Yes, I did. Can you re-explain? I'm a little bit confused. What do they want you to do more in the first 3 chapters?
I'm just saying, well, for children's,
Yeah.
they want the focus to be on the character and the voice of the character and away from the world building.
Okay. So like, okay.
More character, less world building. That's how they said it to me. What they really meant was, Brandon, these technical terms for all your magic things, those can be moved. All right, any other questions on prose? I am not a master of prose. If you want to learn from a master of prose, I guess Leslie Norris is not around anymore. He would have been the first place I sent you, but there are better teachers of it. Lance Larson is very good at prose in the English department. He doesn't much care for fantasy. He told me to that he would he asked me to read 100 Years of Solitude to learn how to write a better fantasy book. And I read it and I said, Lance, this is a beautiful book. This is not a fantasy book. But he does really understand prose. So learning from a poet about choosing the right words is a great place to go. And there are people in the department who are very good at this. It is not my strong suit. I'll be upfront with you on that. These are tricks.